Howdy, howdy. I'm Joel, director at Small Goods Gym.
Am I taking it? Holly, coach at Small Goods Gym.
I'm going to say just slightly overrated. I generally tell people I'd rather not see them do this in the gym. And that's because they're worried about the small stuff rather than the big stuff like sleeping and eating correctly. But generally speaking, I think a lot of people could do occasionally some hard stuff a little bit more, and it wouldn't hurt them. So I'm going to say slightly overrated.
I'm going to say overrated. I think a lot of people want to do this to try and get better results, but they haven't really looked at the research. So if you're doing cold plunges within 6 hours after training, blunts hypertrophy. So don't do them after training.
Trap bar is a main lift. I'm going to say appropriately rated, because I don't think they're rated that highly to begin with if you know what you're talking about.
I want to say no comment. I've never used a trap bar deadlift, so I'm not sure. But yeah, I don't think they are highly rated, so I wouldn't say overrated, but they're not underrated either. So I'd say the same as you, appropriately rated.
Oh, this is an interesting one. I think if you're rehabbing an injury, probably appropriately rated if you've got the access to the equipment especially. But I would say not going to find that equipment particularly often unless you're looking for it. And a lot of people are not going to know how to use it appropriately. So I'm going to say maybe slightly underrated actually.
I would say something similar. I would say underrated for rehab. If you've got like load caps and stuff, making that weight just better, then I would say, yeah, underrated.
For overall health, underrated. I think very easy to skip on this, and I'll say I'm guilty myself. No one wants to do the unsexy thing, but Zone 2 is exactly that, unsexy and very good for you. So I'm going to say definitely underrated.
I would have to agree. I think definitely underrated. I think most people could do with a little bit more Zone 2 cardio. I think for fatigue management wise as well, I think it's one of the best things you can do alongside lifting. Not creating too much fatigue. And I think it's just awesome. You feel better and you look better and everything's better.
I think if we're talking specific Olympic lifts in general athletic training, especially the competition lifts, I'm going to say appropriately rated. I think a lot of people slam them. And they're a little bit overshot by some people. But I think if we're including derivatives, then severely underrated. You can create some amazing forces in some very, very fast time frames, and especially within a gym context with limited equipment, there isn't going to be too much that will allow you to mimic something along those lines. So pretty underrated in that sense.
I think they are underrated. I think they're a very, very good tool that you can use to maximize athletic performance 100%. Power and acceleration.
I think they're overrated. I think that there are scenarios where they are really useful, and I do prescribe my clients to go see people for this reason semi-regularly. But I think what we've got to understand is that load management and stress management outside of the gym really are going to be key factors in not having to get to this place. But if we get to the place where this is necessary, indisposable. So I'm going to say overrated in general, but we've got to be smart with how we use these tools.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I would definitely say overrated, because I think if you can appropriate manage your load, then you won't really get to a point where you need as much. But I definitely think in some places, like when you're doing, say, you're close to a competition and load's high and everything's really hard, then doing these sorts of things definitely can help, but also can help from a psychological standpoint as well. So definitely think it's overrated though.
I've always been pretty firmly in team camp. If you train full range and you're doing things with appropriate load, warm-ups probably aren't as necessary as we'd like them to be. If you're warming up your sets, you're getting to your top weights. I don't tend to see them being super important. I don't think specific mobility work is something I've been very big on, but I do think that sometimes I go a little bit too far this way. So I would say in general, I think people place a lot of emphasis on them, and I would say a little bit overrated. But it's kind of like the passive recovery tools, where certain instances where you're just not going to hit particular stimulus without that specific work, then it's probably a little underrated.
I would say overrated. I think in the past, I was one to do way too many warm-ups and spend half an hour doing this and doing that, and I've kind of gone the other route now, and I don't warm up as much. And I think just doing a little bit of movement prep alongside just doing warm-ups of the movement that you're doing is what you need to do. I think people overcomplicate it and do way too much.
I think the pendulum swings on this one between overrated and underrated depending on the season. And at the moment, I feel like people are so afraid of creating too much fatigue that they are not training close enough to failure often enough. I think the program really needs to decide how often you do that. But I think that there are a lot of people that will tell you they're training to failure when they're not. And they're probably not hitting stimulus at moments that they need to in ways that's a problem. So I would say training to failure at the moment, underrated, but there are definitely times where it's super overrated too.
This is a hard one. I'm a chronic overshooter. So for me, I think it's overrated, but I think for a lot of people, it's underrated, especially new people who come into the gym. I feel like they don't really know how to find their limits and push themselves to a point of failure. So for those sorts of people, I think it's very, 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 very beneficial to train to failure and to feel what it's like to get there.
The most fucking overrated thing that exists right now. Sorry to everyone that wears a Whoop or similar in the gym, and please don't sue me for saying this specifically, Whoop. But you want to talk about overthinking, and we have plenty of overthinking in our gym. This is just a tool that creates more noise when it's not necessary. You ask literally anyone with a Whoop, do you see a one-to-one of your performance and your recovery scores? And anyone that has it will say, definitely not. I've had some great days on some shit recovery scores and vice versa. So, maybe it's useful for the HRV readings. Maybe you think a little bit more about your sleep. From that standpoint, it's useful, but largely it just creates noise and makes people focused on even more shit that they just don't need to be thinking about. You know what? Maybe spend the extra 5 minutes a day resting rather than looking at your fucking Whoop scores.
That was great. I agree. I think they're way, way, way too overrated. Some of my best sessions I've ever had is where I felt like absolute trash. So stop being a bitch and go train harder.
Corrective exercise circuits and warm-ups, I think, have their place. Going back to what I was saying before, with things like mobility, it's very easy to be like, okay, cool, we do our squats, we do our lunges, we do this, we do that. And you're not going to hit every way a human body can move in a program that has 15, 20 exercises, which is already a really large number of exercises. So corrective exercises in like a warm-up circuit have their place. I think once again, going back to the whole overthinking thing, I think we're getting very, very good at that. So I would actually say overrated from a standpoint of like, okay, well, if your upper back's stiff, maybe just notice your upper back's stiff and do something about that. It doesn't take more than a couple of brain cells to rub together to say, yep, I'm a bit stiff, maybe I should rotate or I should reach a little bit. But I think creating whole circuits at the start of a training session arbitrarily, probably overrated.
I think they're overrated. They definitely have their time and place, but I think people probably put way too much focus on those sorts of things. Like Joel was saying, if something's sore or stiff, just move it and it will be fine. Overrated.
I didn't want to get here, but we got here, folks. Carnivore diet, overrated or underrated? It's overrated. If you want scurvy, it's appropriately rated. And if you don't want scurvy, maybe just eat an orange once or twice a week. It's not going to be bad for you.
Oh, God. I feel like this was a personal attack. I think the carnivore diet for the right person is underrated. For the wrong person, it's overrated. So that kind of doesn't really answer it, but most of the people that are going to be watching this are people in the gym, and I would say it's overrated. Don't do it. Add some fruit in there. But eat lots of meat.
Pineapple on pizza is criminally overrated. Get that fucking shit off an Italian food. That does not deserve to be there.
I am the other end of the spectrum. You must have pineapple on pizza. If you don't know what good pizza is.
Long Mac topped up is appropriately rated. It's actually a latte with an extra shot. And people that won't admit that should probably grow up a little bit. But for those that like a little bit extra coffee and a somewhat milky substance, it's very appropriately rated and a pretty good time.
I think a Long Mac topped up is underrated. I think a lot of people don't know what it is. And it is the superior drink. So go get a Long Mac.
Anime is forever underrated, and it doesn't matter how many millions and billions of dollars enter the industry through Netflix and other streaming services, it could never be appropriately rated.
I don't watch anime, but I think it's underrated because every time I watch anime, I am pleasantly surprised.